Well, welcome. As we try and educate people on different medical topics, one that keeps just getting overlooked, I guess is the best way to explain it, misunderstood, not paid attention to, is the whole idea of gluten and celiac disease and all of the related issues that come along with gluten. So why don't we start with an introduction, and then you can tell us all about gluten.
Thanks so much, Joe. Gluten is a little protein in wheat, rye, and barley, and it's also in a few odd grains like einkorn and kamut, and there are a few others. They're so odd I can't remember them because I'm not familiar with them. And it does major damage to your intestines. And the damage that it does, it's also found in everything. I mean, wheat is, it's even in a can of jalapeno peppers that you might pull off the shelf. It's just pervasive in our diet. And we've been consuming it for years, and it's more and more in our diet. So if you're sensitive to gluten, which most people are, there's a huge percentage of people, probably a third of the population, you'll have a reaction to it. And it can be a very serious reaction, which is celiac disease. And in order to have celiac, you need a genetic predisposition, so you might have one or two of certain genes, and those are celiac genes. And there are other genes that aren't even talked about that are connected to gluten intolerance. Eventually they will be, hopefully. You need to be consuming gluten. That's the second thing. And the third part is your gut biome. And it's only been in the last 4 or 5 years that they've really talked about your gut biome. Most Americans, well, not most, but many Americans have a junk food diet. And I'm thinking, no, and we all love it. I mean, I'm right in there wanting my bit of junk food too, but I make sure it's gluten-free. So when you have those three factors, and if you are intolerant to gluten, and just because you have the genes doesn't mean you will be intolerant, but when your gut biome is so out of whack, and you're eating a lot of gluten, and you've got the genes, you're ripe to develop celiac disease. And celiac disease is a destruction of your villi. Now, you want to know what those are. You probably know, but your villi are those little hairs in your gut, and there's thousands of them. And there's a lot of absorption room up and down each villi.
Well, they increase surface area.
Right. So that absorption room is to absorb your vitamins and minerals from all the good food you should be eating.
But don't they also synthesize certain critical enzymes? When I think of the villi and...
Yes, and especially the lactase enzyme is produced in the tip of your villi. So if your villi are destroyed, they're all worn down and flattened out, can't do their job, you may not be able to handle lactose. And I believe there are not too many doctors that are aware of that. You know, they just tell their patients to drink Lactaid, and they're not addressing the issue. This is a big issue, and it
so condition number one, I have to have a genetic predisposition to being gluten sensitive.
Right.
But even if I have that, if I modify my gluten intake, I don't necessarily develop celiacs.
You may not. You know, I mean, I can't give you all the specifics on this.
At the end of the day, we can't say one answer solves all humans. But that's a good first step to not.
Right.
And then the third...
Well, you need to have, your gut biome needs to be in good shape. You need to be eating gluten. You need to have a genetic predisposition.
Because, you know, when you think about it, it's only been in the last few years that we've been able to map the microbiome.
I think so.
Yeah, it's only, I mean, when you look back 10 years ago,
Right.
the sequencing units just weren't there to do it. Now you're seeing more and more work for different diseases, for things, looking at the microbiome, saying, okay, if you, as you say, if you wear down parts of the gut, the GI tract, you can have some pretty nasty side effects.
Oh, there's no end to them. Literally, this celiac can affect any part of your body. It can affect your brain, your neurons, your blood, bones, skin, your organs, and what's left. And it can affect the fetus terribly.
So now, Annie, when we turn around, and if somebody was come up to me and say, hey, Al, what is a gluten? How would you answer?
Well, I don't get terribly into the biological aspect or the scientific.
Well, no,
but gluten is the sticky stuff that holds your bread together and makes it crunchy and chewy. And it's a little protein, and it is in wheat, rye, and barley, which wheat is in everything, so.
Because I was going to say, realistically, I mean, my downfall, my rotundness was always due to being in Paris and having baguettes.
Oh, yeah.
I got busted because, I'd pick up a baguette, get on the train, and when I got home, I'd hand my darling bride a shot of baguette. So I thought I could,
Nice
I
guy.
thought I could outfox her. I came home and said, see, a virgin baguette. She immediately looked at me and said, you bought 2, didn't you?
Yeah.
It's like, yes. But, you think about it, wheat, what isn't it in?
It's in everything, really. You have to become a hawk if you have this issue. And now many things are labeled gluten-free, and it's nice when they're labeled certified gluten-free because then you know they really are.
Okay, roll that one back.
Well,
so somebody's sticking a gluten-free.
Well, there's some testing that goes on, that can go on with certain companies that I'm sure adds to the price of the product.
Well,
But
it
they will
reminds me
test.
of no sugar added. And then when you look at the label, that ice cream is full of sugar, but they haven't added any.
Right.
So I wonder sometimes when they say
Well-
kind of gluten-free.
Well, I think I've read no added gluten in a couple of things.
Yes.
But
I mean, I can take a pizza.
and then you'll have a bag of carrots that might say gluten-free. Well, no kidding.
No, but I take a pizza. No added gluten. Okay,
no
but
added gluten.
the...
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what that means.
Well, I was going to say, isn't the dough full of gluten? Right, it's full of wheat.
Well, I haven't run across that one yet.
I've seen. I started becoming more sensitive to it as a friend. We found out she had celiac. So not understanding
Well,
it.
if you want to find out if you're really sensitive to it, try giving it up, because I always recommend that people get tested, and that's a big problem in itself, the testing. But I always suggest that, okay, you could get tested, but you could also just try the diet. Try it for 2 or 3 weeks.
But now when you say
Take it
get
completely out.
tested,
Yeah.
so I go during my normal physical, and they're poking and prodding, you're peeing in a cup and they're sticking harpoons into you, and they're doing all sorts of standard tests. Can I say, hey, check for gluten issues too?
Well, you can, and they may not if you're not having typical gastro issues, but there's way more to this than typical gastro issues. And I, through my reading, came up with 4 tests that I think you should request if you have almost any health issue,
Okay.
any chronic health issue.
Test number 1?
It's called TTG, tissue transglutaminase, and that's a typical test that if your doctor thinks of it, you might be lucky enough to get that one.
Okay.
There's an EMA, endomysial antibody test. I don't think they're giving that so much because it's more costly. It takes a real person to read it.
No, you're doing an ELISA. I mean, that's
Well,
going
I
to...
think the TTG might
Is it a
be.
chemist?
Yeah, I'm not sure about
Well, no, I thought the EMA was an ELISA assay,
well, it might be.
because then it's real money.
Yeah, oh.
See, if you
so
can
it's
do it on a chemistry analyzer, they take a spot of blood, they do 50 assays all at once. That's easy. when they have to do those antibody tests, a lot of them on the ELISAs, what will they charge you separately for
Well,
those?
and I think that's why they're not doing that one. But the third test is an Antigliadin antibody test. And gliadin is part of the little gluten protein. So the NIH, I believe, does not recognize this. But I think it's a very valuable test, and I know that European researchers and doctors are using it, and a few in the States. And that test can clue you in as to whether you're sensitive to gluten. Do you have these antibodies?
Well, you know, NIH, you can't take away from the fact that they fund 85% of basic biological research in the US. But they're researchers. If I wanted to see if a test was covered, I guess I'd go to the CPT code. Because if there's a CPT code available, then typically the insurance companies will cover it. And the
Right.
Quests or the LabCorps will have a test for it.
Well, I'm almost sure that at least the last two might not be covered. And the last one is called a total serum IgA. And some people do not produce enough IgA. So if you can't produce enough of the IgA antibody, the first three tests are not going to be valid
Oh, wow.
because those are IgA antibody tests. So testing is a big thing, and I'm very disturbed because my grandkid way back 04 had about 12 symptoms going on. His doctor did not have a clue that one of these symptoms, if it's lingering, could be celiac.
Really?
Yeah. Or it might be gluten intolerance.
Now, if I wanted to find out about these tests, I'd probably go to Mayo Clinic. They have medical services where they do tests.
Right.
They have the most comprehensive of all the four big labs, Quest, LabCorp, Mayo, and ARUP. Mayo has the most technical explanation for all of their tests. So, you know, again, you bring up a question, how do you find out if it's being done? I'd start with Mayo and then Quest, then LabCorp to find out if the tests are even available.
Yeah, I think I went to Mayo quite a while back and a couple of others to see what they were doing. And at the time, they were talking about more testing then, which might be applicable, than they are now.
Because what I worry
So-
about is what you just said. Most doctors aren't educated thoroughly in this, so they don't look for it.
Yeah, right. There's very little in the way of conferences being put out there that I can see. And what is maybe being put together by one or two universities or labs, I'd question what their testing is going to be. What are they going to teach these doctors? If they're only going to teach them about the TTG, their patients are going to be in a bad way, because I believe the TTG, maybe the EMA, can have quite a high number of false negatives. And one study that I read said there were 60 to 70% false negatives.
Holy moly.
So if that's the only test that you're being given, good luck to you, you know?
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Because usually, if you're up in the 20, 30% false positive, false negative, the test is not valid.
right.
70%, I could get a false feeling of, you know, hey, everything's fine with me. If 70% of the people are false negative. I mean,
Right.
I sometimes think false negatives are worse than false positives.
Well,
At least the false positive makes me go get more testing.
right. Yeah, we're not in a very good situation when it comes to testing, I don't believe. And I really strongly feel that the Antigliadin antibody test, the blood tests, these are all blood tests, could be significant. And the other testing that we found out about after most of us tested negative on the blood tests, and I even knew to request 3 of those 4 blood tests because of my reading. This is going back 13 years. My grandkid was the only one with celiac. The rest of us were negative on blood. I found out about a stool test. It's very sensitive. Everybody in the family was positive. We all started doing the diet. Everybody's life turned around. The 2 granddaughters, the other grandkid had stuff going on. My 2 daughters, 2 of the 3 had serious stuff going on. My husband's had stuff going on. And I mean, my life has totally changed because
Now,
of this
that's
diet.
something that I bet most people, they think of gluten problems with us celiac patients. None of us have gluten problems.
You don't think you do.
But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you don't know.
So if I don't have a real chronic issue, I could still be negatively affected by consuming
Right.
gluten.
That's right. You can have full-blown celiac disease, so the research says, and have no obvious symptoms. You know, you might be a little tired, you might catch a cold now and then. Well, being a little tired and catching colds is a sign that your immune system is down. And why is your immune system down? You know.
Being tired means I'm old.
No, it doesn't. No, I beg to differ with that because I am in better shape, and I'm a lot older than you. I'm
now-
in better shape in my,
And
well,
if I buy onto this, I do my research.
yeah,
I go on and I find, I don't remember, but you know, the AGA test, whatever it is, I look them up.
Mm-hmm.
Now I say, you know, maybe I don't have full-blown celiac, but maybe I'm being affected. And I say, okay, I want to try this gluten-free diet.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean I only eat carrots?
Oh, no, of course not. No, and now there's all kinds of food out there. I mean, the big food companies had jumped way on years ago because they were smart and they knew there was money to be made. The medical people are not jumping on so fast because they have huge money to be lost. Because at the end of the first year of doing this diet, my whole family were going for checkups, health checkups, not sick visits. So, I don't know what to say.
But I mean, realistically, it's always amazing when you got a Vertex that comes up with a cure for Hep C. Pharmaceutical industries don't tend to want cures
No, they don't.
because if you have hepatitis C and I invest $80,000 in you, you're no longer a customer.
Right.
You know, it's always been, don't cure it, just control it. Well, if you're going to put me on a gluten-free diet and all of a sudden I'm healthy, where is there money to be made?
There is not much, really. I mean, although things can come back, people can be getting hit by gluten, which keeps the process going. A lot of people that are doing this diet are still affected. Their villi are still shot to pieces.
Do they regenerate?
They do regenerate, yeah. If the conditions are right, you know, you have to have a,
But it's not like a cirrhosis of the liver that if I've abused myself, that I'm going to literally kill tissue and it ain't coming back.
no, it should regenerate. It just depends on the health of your gut biome and what you're eating.
So where do I find all these little glutens? If I want to do this gluten-free diet,
Where do you find them?
Yeah,
The
how do I avoid
gluten-free?
them?
How do you avoid them?
you know, I sit there and say, okay, I want to try this. I don't want to eat any more of these little glutens.
Well, now there's so much gluten-free food out there that is labeled gluten-free.
Like,
Crackers, cookies, all kinds of mixes. You know, King Arthur jumped on, and they have got some pretty tasty mixes. It's a company, Bob's Red Mill, has a lot of gluten-free products.
well, you're telling me I can still eat crackers?
Oh yeah, you can still eat cookies and you can still have brownies. I mean, baklava might be tough. You know, I'm hoping somebody will come up with a
Gluten-free
phyllo dough.
yeah, phyllo that's gluten-free.
Yeah, really.
And still be crispy, yeah. And,
But I just made Vahan a blueberry pie, and I changed the recipe a little. It was a Bob's Red Mill mix, and it's kind of hard to roll out. So I remembered an old recipe that had an egg in it and a little vinegar, so I added that. It rolled out beautifully. It was tasty. It was wicked. And gluten-free. Yeah.
So, realistically, if I want to start on this gluten-free, What are the typical foods you tell me?
Well,
that-
if you want to start on this, I don't recommend that you just start on it. There's too much bad stuff linked to this for anybody to just start on it. It would be important to find out if you were sensitive. And
well, you said get tested.
you could request the 4 blood tests. You might only get the first one covered by insurance. And if that's the case, I tell people, jump over to my next chapter and read about the stool test and do that. It's the best money I ever spent on my family, and it cost me a fortune because I did everybody. You know, I mean, I had been reading and I knew.
What's a test typically cost?
Well, you could do, well, when I did it, there were 5 parts to the test, and it cost 3 something. Now it's 2 something for 3 parts, and you can do the Antigliadin antibody test for $99, which is cheap money to find out if you're intolerant to
if
gluten.
you're finding you got some symptoms, you're talking $300-400, put you on the right path.
You could get on the right path for $269 if you did
Okay.
the stool testing, yeah. If you did only the Antigliadin antibody for $99, you could still get on the right path. I like the 3-part panel because there's a really good malabsorption test. And that showed me that I was badly malabsorbing without having an endoscopic biopsy. Now, if you test positive on the blood test, or the first couple of blood tests for celiac, the gold standard for diagnosing celiac is an endoscopic biopsy where they go down to your small intestine and they take snips of your villi to see if they are shot to pieces. And if they're shot to pieces, they say you have celiac. But celiac is only one small phase of this thing.
Okay.
And Dr. Fine, who does the stool test, is not interested in celiac. He's interested in knowing whether you're gluten intolerant. Because this thing can surface in other parts of your body. It can surface as dermatitis herpetiformis, which is a dual-sided nasty rash, you know, to both elbows, both knees, whatever. Very nasty. That is kind of the skin version of celiac. They're finding now that there are the antibodies in your brain, and you can do a TTG test for that, but I haven't heard that anybody's getting that test. I think it's developed, and it might be out there, you know, in some of the teaching hospitals and stuff, and the celiac labs, but it's big and it's not being properly addressed, and it's very irritating to me because I spent 7 years reading this, almost like a full-time job. I got my first computer, little did I know anything about a computer. And for 7 years I pulled information off and read, and my husband finally said, year 7, Ann, would you quit doing the research and get the book done? So he must have said that at least 6 times, and that's when I started pulling all my stories together and getting the research matched up and getting the book in some sort of shape. And I had to do this because I was reading so much information on this. I was so disturbed that my grandkid's doctor didn't know anything about this. My own doctor knew very little. I suggested the tests. And so I was reading The Tipping Point at the time by Malcolm Gladwell, and I thought, wow, this is an empowering book. I think I can do something about this. And I was totally crazed and thought, I think we're going to write a book on this. And the public needs to know this. So that's what I got stories from people. I wanted them to know about all these ailments that can be wrong with you. I mean, I have close friends that say, Ann, you think everything is connected to gluten. They haven't even cracked the cover of my book. They don't know. They do not know the research, and it is huge.
Well, I guess a lot of people really think gluten is a GI issue.
Exactly.
And that,
even some doctors.
Because, you don't think of a dermatitis.
Right.
How can that be related to gluten? I mean, it's on my skin.
Well, it's because your villi are shot to pieces and you're not absorbing your nutrients to keep your body healthy. And your body, I have a short skin chapter because I didn't really go into it. I went into a few of the more common, like acne or psoriasis or eczema. But there are at least 15 to 20 10-syllable skin diseases that I never heard of, and you can't pronounce them or remember them, you know. And even hangnails get better if you take gluten out of your life. Something as simple as a hangnail, which is a sort of a skin problem.
You know, it's amazing because if you think about how many decades it took us to more or less get nicotine cigarettes out of our bodies. You know, you look back in the 50s, and it was a glamour thing. Everybody smoked. I'm being facetious, not everybody, but... And it's only now that, you know, I can see the children are growing up thinking that cigarettes, really believing they're bad.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah, but I mean, again, you sit there and say something as obvious as, you know, what percentage of lung cancer goes right back to smoking? Okay, why wouldn't you just stop? Now you sit there and say, for gluten, why wouldn't you just offer gluten-free food everywhere?
Well, we found a restaurant that actually did offer, not the whole, actually, yeah, one of the restaurants was all gluten-free. This was up in Canada. It was fabulous. Everything on the menu. And they didn't put it out there as all gluten-free, but people like me would find out about it. I will be back at that restaurant some year.
What's the advantage to eating gluten for people?
The advantage to eating gluten?
Yeah, I mean...
Well, I don't imagine there's much of an advantage at all.
It's not taste.
You don't need to have gluten to exist.
No, but I'm just thinking, it's not like when people say you should cut excessive amounts of sugar out of you.
Right.
Okay, we're drinking a Coca-Cola. I mean, you think of 40 grams of sugar sitting, or 400 grams of sugar, whatever it is. It's ridiculous how much sugar.
Right.
But it tastes good.
Right.
So, you know, there's an advantage. There's a candy bowl, and you know better at our age than to dip into a Jolly Rogers candy, but the advantage is it tastes good.
Right.
If I eliminate gluten, do I really even know?
Well, it depends on what you're eating, I guess, if you're eliminating it. I mean, there are some products out there. I bought some crackers when we did this road trip in Canada. They're not very good. They were gluten-free. I mean, you know, who's testing your product is what I want to know, because they were awful. But gluten, I mean, the only real advantage to gluten is that it holds your bread together and your cookies and your pizza dough. But there are other products that can do that. And I'm going blank right now on what they are.
No, but I mean, what you're
like
telling...
guar gum or xanthan gum, you know. If you don't add that, your product is going to crumble to pieces.
But there are bread you know, that don't have gluten that you can eat.
Right. Oh, there's a ton of bread. Yeah,
There
it's
are
gotten
cookies,
better and better.
I got the Ritz cracker. I mean, the bane of health.
I remember those Ritz crackers very well.
6 crackers, 200 calories. You know, it's like, I love those crackers.
Then put some cheese on it. And,
good night.
You know,
good
it's
night.
all over for me.
It's rotundness plus. But you sit there and say, okay, so they have the low-fat cardboard version Ritz makes. And well, that took the taste right out of it. But that's not true in gluten, though. I mean, if you get cookies and cakes, you still have good tasting.
There can be. Yeah, they've improved it, really, over the years. It used to be quite bad. But I like to mess around with some of the mixes. I'll do something a little different and, you know, might improve it even a little bit more.
So now, if I'm not just talking GI tract issues, and I'm not just talking skin, you say gluten affects the body.
Yes.
I mean, at the root cause, if I'm not absorbing the vitamins, nutrients that I need, obviously
Can
the whole...
anything.
Yes.
And then there are the antibodies, too. The immune response can affect parts of the body too. You know, I expect that my thyroid was totally damaged because of gluten. And the antibodies, they seem to go after a weak spot in your body, is what some of the experts say. And there's quite a bit of research linking thyroid disease.
Really?
Yeah.
So how?
And arthritis. And, you know, dementia. I mean, there's just huge. It's huge.
Well, then my wife will accuse me of being gluten sensitive if dementia counts, because she's always accusing me of early stage dementia.
Yeah, well, we're all getting there a little bit, but I was just listening to something really interesting today, and cancers and dementia. I mean, there are things you can do about it, and one of those things is to get your gut biome in good shape. Get rid of the gluten. Because actually there's some study that says that nobody should be eating wheat. In one study, everybody showed a toxic response.
To the gluten in wheat.
To the gluten, yeah. However, not too many doctors are telling you that, you know.
But why? Why is the medical community turning a blind eye?
Well, they have huge business to be lost if too many people do this too quickly. And they're also working on medication, pills that will nullify the toxic effects. And, you know, I have a feeling that some of them, you know, as soon as they really come up with a good pill, all of a sudden everybody's going to be diagnosed with gluten intolerance. That's when they'll maybe start looking at, the other Antigliadin Test.
There's the good point when you think about when we were kids. How many of your friends were gluten or lactase intolerant? I don't remember that.
None of them. None of them.
Were they? Or did we just not know?
Well, we did not know because I have storytellers in my book. I have one fellow who's probably my age, so he's way up there. And he looks back to when he was a kid and realizes that he was intolerant to gluten then and probably had celiac. He had allergies going on. He had several skin conditions. And as life went on, he was so tired and had such fatigue that he had to go into his car at lunchtime and take a nap.
Wow.
Then he had depression going on. He had atrial fib happening, and memory issues were interfering with his job. He was in the insurance business. And 7 months after figuring this out, luckily one of his doctors said, "Gee, have we tested you for celiac?" "No." "Well, let's do it." And he was positive. 7 months later, every one of those things vanished, including the atrial fib and the memory issues. So it's really important to look at this. I mean, I'm getting to that point too, a little. It's hard pulling up a word here and there, and
well, I mean, a lot of it you just attribute
names,
to a senior moment.
I've always been bad with names.
But a lot of it you just attribute to I'm getting a little older and I'm having a senior moment. But if this really is affecting.
Well, if you start putting your keys in the fridge, then you've got a problem. But I'm trying to think. I heard of a woman who was 85 and she was headed for a dementia unit. They found out she had celiac, put her on the diet. She's living back at her place.
Really?
Yeah. And I think there was another one. This is a really good story. This woman's dad was in hospice, not doing well at all, naturally. And she found out somehow something, I think she found out she was intolerant herself and decided to test her father. He had celiac. They put him on the diet. He was out of hospice and he lived another 3 years. He eventually died of some cardio problems, and there are a lot of cardio problems linked to this topic that may have been developing all those years. So
seriously?
Seriously, yeah. And a friend of my husband's just bumped into Vahan, and he said, "Oh, I've got to talk to your wife. My father was having a terrible time, and I don't know the details, but he's 91. He was having really bad health issues. They found out it was celiac and got him going on the diet, and he's doing great. I've heard of 3 other fellows who were in the hospital who thought they were dying, discovered they had celiac, put them on the diet, and life is good for these people. So.
Now, if I want to learn more, I read a book.
Oh, absolutely. I
read a
wrote
book.
this book. I wrote this book for you, Al. And
Yeah.
all your friends that are sick and tired or on drugs or, not feeling well and not functioning properly. Something today was just talking about health, and health is not just the absence of illness. It's being optimally functioning,
Well, it's all about quality of life.
on levels.
If my knees are hurting me and I can't walk, if I'm tired like you say,
Right.
if I'm tired all the time, there's something not right there.
That's right. And it's something that you can do something about in most cases.
Now, before you really think, if I go on this gluten-free life, 3
Get
months?
tested first.
Well, I'm tested,
Yeah,
and I
and
say,
you're
okay,
positive.
I'm sensitive. Hopefully not positive for celiac, but I'm sensitive.
Yeah.
I start a gluten-free diet. When would we're in America. People have no tolerance for patience.
Right.
It's not a day, it's not a week. Is it 3 months, 6 months? When would I really start feeling it?
Well, with my grandson, his tummy felt better a day and a half later.
Oh my God.
He was a very pale, very thin kid, and he had color in his cheeks a week and a half later, and a couple months later, his muscles were developing. And those are only just 3 of his problems. I mean, he was hungry all the time because the kid was starving. He was malabsorbing. He had bone and pain, muscle pain, and I expect he would have developed cancer of the bone
Well, when
or
you
blood.
think about some of the kids who suffer from the liposomal storage disorders, Gaucher's, Pompe's, they're eating, they just can't absorb anything.
Well, maybe there's a connection here that mainstream medicine or the researchers have not checked out. I don't know. I'll have to get that.
No, but it's just interesting because,
Yeah.
you got a company, Genzyme, that was made on treating, these liposomal storage disorders where they just cannot convert ADP to ATP. You can't make energy out of your food. So it's not that you're not getting food. You just don't make the enzymes.
Right.
And now the fundamental question is, why aren't you making those enzymes?
Well, some of those enzymes are produced in your pancreas, I think, and in your villi, and I don't know where else.
Well, if they're
but-
made in the villi and you're crunching your villi,
Well,
okay.
yeah.
If I flatten the factory that makes the product, then I wonder why I don't have the product.
That's right.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I get stories. I have people sending me their stories now, which is great, and they're all over the place. My father died of liver cancer. This was years before I had any clue about gluten. So one day I was reading the liver research on hepatic liver, sclerosing cholangitis. There were a couple of others. And the research said that these will resolve if you take gluten out of your life. I'm pretty sure that's the word they used, at least 2 or 3 of those studies. And so I thought, gee, I wonder if my father might have had those diseases and then it turned to cancer. Well, his doctor had long been retired, but I knew the fellow, so I tracked him down in Norway. I said, do you think Dad could have had any of these diseases? He said, yeah, I think he had the first 2. I thought, wow, my father would have been 100 this year, and the Connieris family had great longevity, and he probably still would have been kicking if I knew then about gluten, what I know now. Yeah.
Now, does it affect children? Is it a pediatric?
It's an everybody problem. kids, I mean, even the fetus can be affected, young children, you know, I don't think colic, I mean, a colicky kid would make me wonder what's going on inside to make this kid fuss. Stomach pain or what? You know, could be what's the mother eating, what's in the breast milk. My own daughter didn't have enough breast milk for one of our kids, it seemed. And the child was, at the time, not meeting her, you know, standing, and she wasn't crawling, and talking was really late. And when we found out about the rest of us, she was too young to test. We just put her on the diet too. She's fabulous today. I mean, she's got her act together. Let's put it that way.
So, I mean, realistically, that number one you said was a genetic predisposition.
Yeah.
Do I see it right away as a child, or can I not notice it till I become an adult?
Notice that you have a genetic predisposition?
Well, no, I don't know it's there.
You don't?
I'm not tested for it.
Yeah.
How do I know? I mean, do I wake up one day and say, oh God, I'm tired, I have this, I'm going to go get tested? Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, do I see it in the children right away, or can it be masked?
Well, I think it's going to surface. It's going to surface with irritability, fidgetiness. I mean, there's a lot of ADD, ADHD linked to this, I think, because of lack of vitamins that these kids are not getting. He was a tired kid. I mean,
But
I
it's
think
not lack of vitamins you're getting, it's lack of absorption.
lack of absorption. Yeah, well, you're not getting them because they're going out the door.
Right, but I'm just thinking parents would look and say, but I'm giving the multivitamin tablet.
Right.
So they're getting vitamins, they're
Right.
just not absorbing them.
Right. And, you know, with my grandson, the oldest one, I think it probably was going on for a couple of years. He was really thin, he was very pale. We didn't know, you know. Finally, my cousin's wife, who had celiac, said, Ann, there's a new test for celiac. Why don't you get him tested? After 3 family get-togethers and asking about him, you know, I thought, wow, great, let's do that. And he was, sky high, off the charts, positive.
Really?
Yeah.
But now, you know, you refer to somebody being thin, you know, pale, rotund old men.
And heavy women, you know, you can, I think, I don't know what the theory behind this is, but I think you can be craving foods because your body is not getting the nourishment it needs. And I remember hitting those cracker boxes and piling the cheese on. I mean, really. And I managed to put on a lot of weight.
Seriously?
Yeah, which most of it is gone.
I was going to say, where'd it go? I want to learn.
Most of it is gone, and I worked really hard at that. But also, many people have told me they've dropped 10 to 15 pounds without thinking about it once they get gluten out. And other people have said they've lost 30 to 40 pounds, and it has kind of peeled off. And I don't recommend this as a weight loss thing. I always go back to get tested, find out if you're intolerant. If you're super thin and you can't put weight on and you're really skinny and bony and pale,
Can I hate them?
get tested.
Can I hate them? Can't put weight on? I look at a Ritz cracker and there's a pound right there.
Well, I was working at my co-op today and someone came in and I thought, oh, God, I wish I could talk to this person. I just can't do that to customers. But you know, I can look at people and say, oh my, do I dare go over and talk to that mother about this child? And I do sometimes.
That's got to be tough because as a parent, you would think if there's anything somebody can add to help me make my child healthier,
Yeah,
I want to know.
yeah,
But if a stranger comes up to you and say, your child could be having a problem because you're not educated,
yeah. Well, I wouldn't exactly
well,
say
no,
that.
but at
Jeez.
the end of the day, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of kids exhibiting, you know, even allergies. Allergies and asthma. A lot of kids have. I mean, it just keeps going up in the school systems. You ask any nurse, and they'll tell you, yeah, it's gone up over the last, I don't know how many years, 20 years. And with me, my allergies, and I was on puffers every now and then, depending on something, I don't know what, maybe how much gluten I had. I was on those for a while, and at the end of that first year of really doing this diet, I do not cheat on this diet. I aim for 0 gluten. And at the end of that first year, my allergies basically were gone. The puffer was gone. My energy was back. That was back maybe in 3 weeks or so. And weight started to come off.
Now, realistically, people can look and say, if it's really tied to gluten, why aren't physicians helping their patients?
Well, I think a lot of it is because there's huge unawareness. You know, there's over 300 symptoms and diseases linked to gluten and celiac by over 19,000 studies. And the researchers, to me, appear to be all on one side of the river. The doctors are on the other side of the river. Nobody's conversing. Nobody's talking. Nobody's putting the conferences out and saying, wow, look at these liver conditions that are linked to gluten.
Well, see, that's what I was going to ask.
I mean, it's front page news. But is anybody going to believe it? Are the doctors, the doctors need to be educated on this. They need conferences. They need their CME credits. And I really feel that there's a blind eye and a cold shoulder to this.
Now, is NIH funding, I mean, when you think about it, 80-odd% of biological fundamental research is funded by NIH. Are they funding anything to study?
I don't really know about that. I don't think the NIH is doing too much. I could be wrong. I wish somebody would prove me wrong on that.
Well, I mean,
and I wonder how much of the studies are also being funded by Big Pharma. So, you know, there's a big conflict.
Not a lot when you look at fundamental research.
Yeah.
You know, Big Pharma has said when you look at basic research, there's no money to be made.
Yeah.
So that's why NIH has to fund it, because as I look at applied research, you know, once there's an avenue that I can follow and develop a treatment, then Big Pharma steps in, because, you know, you think about cholesterol maintenance, Lipitor. Think they're making a little money on those?
Well, yeah, and do you really need it? I mean, I think my cholesterol came down maybe 20 points after being on a gluten-free diet.
But how many people are automatically put on atorvastatin or something on that line?
Yeah, I wouldn't take the stuff myself.
Yeah, but realistically, you go to your physician, and he or she looks at you and says, I'm going to put you on 10 mgs. Mm-hmm. Okay. Did your cholesterol, your good cholesterol stay and your bad cholesterol go down? No, 20 mgs.
Yeah.
Do I trust that person? Am I really? I think now people are getting more and more educated because of the internet.
Definitely, unbelievably. Oh, there's so many webinars that are coming across my computer that I want to listen to. I mean, there's one on gluten, there's one on mental health, there's one on cancer, the cancer summit, the everything summit, the childhood disease summit, you name it.
But see, there to me is a very important tool. Mm-hmm. Instead of watching Mr. Good Dog or whatever the TV show is tonight, mm-hmm. jumping on the internet saying, let me listen to a webinar.
Right.
And become more educated.
Yeah.
And you know, I think if most parents knew there could be a problem, I mean, if they think there's a potential issue with their daughter or son, then they'll listen.
Right.
And maybe more people then will ask questions.
Right. I even wonder about the nut allergies. And I've talked to a couple of people whose kids have nut allergies, but they're not quite ready to get tested to see if the kid is also sensitive to gluten.
And I mean, there's one that always amazed me. Peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I mean, when we had lunch in elementary school, it had to be every other kid with peanut butter of something.
Right.
Smearing it all over everybody. And I just sit there and say, now, wait a minute. How? when we were kids, did we never worry about nut allergies?
Yeah,
And now all of a sudden, I mean, you've got whole classrooms that have to be
Right.
nut-free because of sensitivity.
yeah, I don't know if they really know where it's coming from. I know there's a group putting some big studies on to try to find out.
Well, I mean, my question is not even where it's coming from, but are we just getting better at detecting it?
Well, I don't think so, because that'll kill you. I mean, it can kill you. You have
Right.
obvious symptoms. I mean, so.
But do you remember as a child ever being banned from eating peanut butter at lunch? So wait a minute. If I was never in a class and you were never in a class, were we just lucky that somehow we never had a nut allergy
No, somehow
case?
No, it's developed somehow, and I think it has a lot to do with your gut biome. And your gut biome, according to a researcher in Boston at Harvard, Dr. Fasano, he's done some big research, and he talks about a protein called zonulin. The more gluten you have, the more the zonulin is produced, and therefore it opens the little space between your cells in your gut that are like one layer thick. So if they're not tight, and when they're tight they keep things out, if they're opened, then things get into your bloodstream that don't belong there. Maybe the peanut,
But see, that's a
protein
scary
does,
movie,
you know.
Annie, because
and the wheat certainly does.
if you're allowing things into the bloodstream that shouldn't be, and you then wonder, will they cross the blood-brain barrier? And now all of
Yep.
a sudden, you're getting issues, up in the
Right.
brain that were never there before.
Right. Well, I don't think we're allowing it. It's happening.
Well, but whatever reason,
yeah.
if your lifestyle is such, that, like you say, too many of us eat junk food. And I'd hate to say there's good junk food and bad junk food, but there's junk food and then there's junk food. If I can modify that, I mean, just on general weight gain, they tell you that, you have your little salad at lunch and my little dog food, whatever those little lean cuisine dog food things are.
Oh, gosh.
And you sit there and say, if I eat one of those, is it really healthy?
I've never gone there. I don't think so. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Well,
But then I go and I look at some of the candy. And there's 500 calories sitting in that and tons of sugar. So
well, they say dark chocolate is good.
is that right?
Yeah.
God bless Hershey. So, a lot of it is just, as you say, education.
Right.
And that I'd say, if you have a question, get on the web.
Right.
If I can find half an hour to watch Wheel of Dog Meat or Wheel of Fortune, whatever they call it, I can probably find 20 minutes to read something.
And then you're going to want to read more and more. I mean, there's so much out there. Some of these webinars have about 30 experts. And the way they do it is they put on 5 or 6 a day. Well, of course, you don't have that kind of time. So you listen to 1 or 2, and then they get you later to buy the program if you want to listen to all of them. And they're all forward-thinking, mostly functional medicine doctors and practitioners that are looking at the bottom line as to what is making you sick. There's a trigger for most of this. And it isn't only gluten. It might be dairy. It could be some of the other proteins we eat. It could be a raft of things.
But you talk about work at MGH, Man's Greatest Hospital in Boston.
Yeah.
If I want to learn, I typically will use Google Scholar, and look for publications.
Right.
Because that's going to tip me off.
Right.
If I start seeing a lot of publications on any subject at MGH or at Baylor or, MD Anderson for cancer, well, yeah, then I'm going to get curious and go snooping around
Right.
and learn more and more. And having an informed opinion is always good.
Right.
Having an informed opinion about your health or your children's health has got to be the most critical thing you could do.
Right. Well, it's interesting because a lot of people think they know a lot about gluten, and they have no idea what there is to know, really. Somebody just the other day said, "Oh, I'm quite well versed in gluten." Okay, but I, you know.
I mean, realistically, if you don't know, and what do? Look just at the label to say it's gluten-free? I mean, you got to become educated, get tested.
You need to, yeah, right, exactly. Get educated. That's why I wrote this book. I mean, I dedicated a decade of my life. I took time away from my family, time away from my garden, and some of the things, I'm an artist, so I took time away from my studio. I was over the edge, totally over the edge. I'm lucky, I'm still married.
Thank God for supportive spouses.
Yeah, really.
You know, but you know, I guess if I was going to ask you for the take-home message.
The take-home, okay. You really need to advocate for yourself because too many people are testing negative and they still have symptoms. So you need, number one, get educated.
Read.
Read. There's a lot of information out there. And this book is well referenced. I have over close to 700 easy-to-read citations in the book. And the second thing is, get tested. Don't play with this. If you start playing with this doing a gluten-free diet, you may really want to get tested later with blood tests, and they won't work because you have to be eating gluten to do the blood tests.
Oh, okay.
And the third thing is, if you're positive, take this very seriously, and it will enhance your life. You've got to do this diet 100%. Whether you have celiac or if you test on the stool test as positive and you're gluten intolerant, you've got to do this test 100%. And I can't tell you the number of people that I run into that, I'll have a little piece of this and a little piece of that. And
yeah, I won't eat at lunch, but then I'll gorge at dinner, so it averages.
Doesn't work that way.
Thank you. I hope that we've shed some light and people will start learning more about the little glutens.
Right. Thanks so much, Joe. I so appreciate this.
And as always, thank you for joining us. To our 6 loyal viewers, may tomorrow be a more healthy night than tonight. May God bless and learn. Best take-home message in the world is become educated so you can ask the right questions. Good night, all.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just